Hello and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to Hope in Action, Cultivating Resilience in Times of Rapid Change. We're hoping this will be a part of a series of events being run by the Network of Wellbeing and Resurgence. So we're actually going to invite you to, if you're the sort of person that uses social media, you're welcome to connect with us via the event hashtag, which is Hope in Action Events. Hopefully my colleague Amy can post that in the chat box so that you've got that available, and then we can kind of connect during the event but also after the event as well, and we can let you know about future events we're running in this series. So yeah, like I say, I'm just going to introduce the organisations hosting the series and the series itself before I hand over to Georgie to introduce the wonderful speakers we have for you this evening. So the Network of Wellbeing, just briefly, is about building wellbeing together, really. So we run online events and lots of other activities to really create a network of people who care about wellbeing of people and also of the planet. And we also run community projects to demonstrate wellbeing in practice. And the Resurgence Trust, our partner organisation in this event, is an educational charity that seeks to inform and inspire ecological regeneration, social justice and spiritual fulfillment through its events, programmes and publications, and the Ecologist news platform and the Resurgence and Ecologist magazine, many of which you guys have probably heard of, because I imagine there's lots of Resurgence magazine fans here this evening. And the Hope in Action series, it's really about supporting ourselves, each other, to have hope in these very uncertain times, and to explore how we can put that hope into action. And what that means, we're going to explore further through the talks this evening. But for now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my Resurgence colleague, Georgie, who's going to introduce our first speakers of the evening. So over to you, Georgie.
Thank you, Flo, and thank you to everyone for being here. It is an honour to introduce today's hope-inspiring speakers. We will hear from each of them for 10 minutes, and I will ring a little bell about 10-15 seconds towards the end of their talks. So our first speaker tonight is the remarkable Satish Kumar, who is the founder of the Resurgence Trust and editor emeritus of Resurgence and Ecologist. Satish is a world-renowned peace-pilgrim and one of the major trailblazers of the UK's environmental movement, who has been setting the global agenda for change for over 50 years. And today we're in for a real treat, as Satish will open his talk with a short meditation. So thank you so much, Satish.
My pleasure, Georgie. Let's begin with a short meditation. We bring our both palms together and we bow to the sacred earth, sacred life, sacred universe, and to each other in gratitude and recognition of our interdependence, interconnection, and interrelatedness. And we hold our palms together as a symbol that unity and diversity dance together, and all opposites complement with each other. Left and right, below and above, masculine and feminine, dark and light, negative and positive, all opposites complement each other and make a whole. And with that sense of wholeness, we breathe and smile. And remember that all living beings upon this earth, humans, animals, plants, rivers, oceans, are all sustained by the same breath of life which we breathe. Thus, we are all connected, and the two palms are connected with each other. with that sense of unity of all life, we breathe and smile with joy and recognize the blessings that we celebrate, the beauty we celebrate, the unity we celebrate. And we breathe and we smile and we celebrate compassion and kindness. And we realize that I am my body, but I am also my breath. And I am spirit. And I am pure consciousness. I am compassion. I am love. I am truth. I am. I am whole. With that contentment, fulfillment, and recognition of blessings, we breathe and smile. Om Shanti. Lead me from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. Peace, peace, peace. May all beings upon this earth be happy, joyful, and fulfilled. And may I be in the service of all living beings. With that, we bow to the universe, to the sacred earth, sacred life, and remember our connectivity with all living beings. Thank you. It is my great pleasure to participate in this event of active hope, and also my pleasure because the two organizations which I celebrate, and I am part of both organizations, Resurgence Trust and the Network of Wellbeing, joining forces together and in organizing this great event. So congratulations to all who have come together to organize this event. Now, if you want to change the world, or if you want to be the part of the change of the world, then you have to be an optimist. A pessimist cannot be an activist. A pessimist can be a journalist, maybe, but not an activist. To be an activist, you have to be an optimist. You have to believe in yourself, and you believe in the greater power and greater goodness of the ultimate reality. If we have no hope, we have no optimism, we cannot be inspired, we cannot be encouraged, we don't have energy to be active. And whenever there are dark forces, prevalent, powerful, dominating the world, the forces of light also emerge. So the darkness is an opportunity to light a candle. If there was no colonialism or imperialism, there would be no Mahatma Gandhi. So for Mahatma Gandhi, the colonialism and imperialism, which was there, nobody wanted it, as far as I know, but it was there. But it became an opportunity for Mahatma Gandhi to stand up with the principles of non-violence and truth. And in the end, that colonialism and imperialism came to an end in India and many other countries. If there was no apartheid, there would be no opportunity for somebody like Nelson Mandela to stand up for the cause of racial harmony. And if there was no racism in the United States, there would be no chance for Martin Luther King to have that opportunity to deliver that great speech of "I have a dream." The dream that Martin Luther King had was coming out of his hope and his optimism. And even in our own time, this climate change, climate catastrophe almost, and climate crisis is giving rise to many, many young people to stand up. Greta Thunberg, at age 16, 17, and 18. What a wonderful young girl, young woman she is, emerging. So that's a wonderful opportunity for Greta Thunberg to stand up. If there was no climate change, there would be no need for Greta Thunberg. And even at the time of presidential inauguration, Amanda Gorman, reading that great poetry. What a great poetry she read and delivery. If there was no Trump and there was no violence in the Capitol, there would be no need for such a poetry as Amanda Gorman read. She will not be inspired to write such a poetry. So we must always remember that whenever there are dark forces, the power and the forces of light also emerge. And that gives us hope. And also, the wars, conflicts, climate change, global warming, nuclear weapons, apartheid, poverty, all the problems we have today, we focus on them, but we don't focus the good things happening in the world. If you look at the women's movement, when I first read a book by Simone de Beauvoir, the French writer, her great book, The Second Sex, I read it in the 60s. At that time, what about the state of the women? Never mind before, when women had no power to vote, no right to vote, no opportunity to vote. They were not allowed to vote. And the Second Sex was written, and many other women, like Germaine Greer, wrote books, campaigned. And big changes have taken place, even though there's a long way to go in every field. There's a long way to go for women's rights. But situation has changed. If Simone de Beauvoir and Germaine Greer and many other suffragettes before them, if they did not have hope and if they did not have optimism, they will not be active. But they were prepared to go to jail. They were prepared to suffer. They were prepared to put their life on line in order to bring transformation, in order to bring change. And so, all these great examples give us opportunity, encouragement, and inspiration to put ourselves in the service of our precious planet Earth and in the service of our great humanity. We are here in the service. So we should not have the optimists and the people with active hope do not think that the world is all wrong and I'm right and I'm going to put the world right. There's no such arrogance. Hope and optimism has to be informed by humility. The word human and humility come from the same root. Without humility, there's no humanity. And so with humility, we say, whatever the situation, this is my opportunity to serve the movement, serve the planet Earth, serve the ecology, serve the women's rights, serve the end of racism and apartheid, serve the humanity in India or China, wherever they are. This is my opportunity. When somebody's sick in your family, what do? You don't curse. You don't say, why are you sick? You don't say that. You say, you are sick, you have a cancer, you have a heart problem, you have some, even old age. I'm here to help you. Even though I know that because of cancer or because of old age or whatever it is, that you are going to die. And yet until you are with us, I will serve and help and love and be compassionate. So that spirit of resilience and humility, we have optimism, we have hope, and we go out in the world to put our lives in the service of our precious planet Earth for the well-being of natural world, the well-being of human world, and well-being of ourselves. So we have to begin with ourselves as well. We have to have hope that I can be well, I can be happy, I can be healthy, and I can be active. So love yourself, and then love your neighbor, and love plants, and love trees, and love animals, and love humanity, love the earth. That is what I would like to say, to remind you that if you want to be an activist, you have to be an optimist. A pessimist cannot be an activist. So I hope that this evening will give you that inspiration. In spite of this pandemic and coronavirus and all the crises we are facing, in spite of all that, we have to remember that we are capable of transformation. We are capable of change, and we can act and act and act. So activism, optimism dance together. Activism and pessimism do not stay together. Activism and pessimism, like chalk and cheese, they don't go together. Optimism and activism go together. So be an activist. I'm 84. I started my activism at age 18, and I'm 84, and I'm still an activist, and I'm going to be an activist until the last breath of my life. That's my promise to you. So be an optimist, be hopeful, be active. Good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Satish. So inspiring. If anyone has any questions for Satish, please do pop them in the chat. And just before your question, put a capital Q or the word question in capitals so that we can see those questions really clearly along with the comments that are coming in. And we'll have time for them at the end. So now we will hear from Sarah Corbett, who is an award-winning activist, an author, and Ashoka Fellow. And she's the founder of the Global Craftivist Collective. Her unique approach to activism, which she calls gentle protest, has helped to change hearts, minds, policies, and laws all around the world. Sarah, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so hard to come after Satish, isn't it? Because you just want him to talk for hours and just nod along. So I loved that, and I'm really grateful to be after such a legend. So here we go. Let's see if this works. You can see my messy screen now. Press play. So I've been an activist since I was 3. I'm now 37, so I've got a few more years to catch up to Satish. But I want to talk about how I stay hopeful as an activist. I think this is a great group. We've got, 4 of us all having very different journeys and very different content to talk about activism, talk about hope. So my view is very much as how can we stay hopeful as activists? All you have to do is Google burnt out activist and you'll get thousands of testimonies, and it is an issue. But I try and stay positive and hopeful. But I did burn out a few years ago. So this is me learning from mistakes, as we all do. My background is, there's a little child on the screen on the far right with a mullet, if you can see, and that's me, age 3, as proof that I was squatting in social housing to save them from demolition. And we won them, so you can see the big banners outside. So growing up, I saw firsthand, growing up in West Everton, in Liverpool in the 80s, we had very high unemployment, we had mouldy houses, so people were getting really unwell. We had a lot of malnutrition, so you still see people who are very petite for their age because of the malnutrition there. So I saw firsthand in a very white working class area inequality and the effects of it. My dad is still the local minister there. My mum was a nurse and then a full-time mum, and now she's a local politician. So we were quite unusual in some ways that we always talked about religions and politics, and we had all of the, anti-apartheid mugs and campaigns, and boycotted, the orange trade and bought lots of fair trade coffee. So I grew up being part of activism, and it very much being something that we grew up of. That is something that you do as a human being, regardless of whether you have a certain faith or no faith. And what keeps me hopeful is this image in lots of ways, is linking to what Satish said. Activism does work. It can work in the long term, it can work in the short term. Yes, we have the good and the bad, and we can go backwards and forwards and sideways, but it does work. So that's why I don't give up on it. But also those stories of, I still remember as that 3-year-old and growing up, having people in our back kitchen talking about activism, where we made mistakes of who to target, and we targeted the wrong person, and it brought the community together. People came up with songs to keep them hopeful. We joke about how you had to laugh so we didn't cry at certain things. It really, in some ways, it was a real gift to bring communities together for this common cause. And I think for me, if I might have given up a few years ago if I hadn't kept hold of seeing the houses that still exist, so that we squatted in, that are still there, seeing the impact of Mandela and Tutu and everyone in South Africa. I went when I was 8 years old for a few weeks to learn what they were doing with peace and reconciliation for my dad's job, to bring it back. And then always looking for the helpers now. I'm always looking for, well, where are the wins? What are the solutions that are being implemented? Where are the famous American TV show of Mr. Rogers, the friendly neighbor? He always talks about where are the helpers. So whenever you see darkness, it is that opportunity where you see so many helpers in different ways. So that always keeps me hopeful. I know I've seen lots of people in the room who knows, you know so much, so I'm not going to preach to the converted. So I was trying to think of, what do I find helpful? And these are just some of the key points for me. And if you want to know about my work, you can Google it. So the first one is, for me, it's, again, links in with what Satish said, is I have a tattoo of a jigsaw piece on my arm, and it's to remind me that I am a piece of the jigsaw. So I'm not the whole jigsaw puzzle where I have to do everything to make the world a better place. But if I'm not doing anything as an activist, there's a gap in that jigsaw puzzle. So I always think that not that in terms of guilt, but in terms of, we all have a place to play in this world. We're all part of that tapestry. We all might have different shaped jigsaw piece because we have different skills and different talents and different contexts. We have different power in different ways, but we are all pieces of this puzzle. And if we're not there, it's noticed. And if we are there, it's noticed. And I think seeing myself as a small jigsaw piece, which is just as important as all of the others, keeps me hopeful that we can all make change, and we've seen it throughout history. very much focus on the dreams. So I do a lot of reading on neuroscience to really help me with my activism, help me stay hopeful. And we know that if you focus on a vision of what you want the world to be, your brain naturally starts creating how you can reach that vision. Whereas if we focus on the problem, all your brain does is go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. So it looks at the problem, it fixates on the problem because we feel attacked and we can't think through the problem. So I talk about how, of course, we should grieve and we should focus on, we should be aware of the problems in the world, but we have to then do what Martin Luther King said and focus on what's that dream? How does the dream look? How does it smell? How does it sound? How does it feel? And how can we be part of making that dream a reality? Knowing that we'll never quite get there, but those steps on the way are just as important. And just focusing on that dream really does inspire me. It reminds me of the great stuff in the world. It reminds me of when I look for things, I look for the solutions and then I can celebrate them. So always being that dream focused person and, you know, dream making, not just thinking about dreams, but how do we make them? And then for me as a craftivist, I love how using your head, hands and heart together is an incredible way to tackle that despair and put it into hopeful action. So, you know, Satish is laughing there because he gave me a great quote for my book that's here talking exactly about this. So when you're in despair, especially, we often will sit and go into a downward spiral because everything just feels too big. But what I love about hand embroidery is you're using your hands so it calms you down. Every repetitive action helps you calm down, slow down, breathe more regularly, be mindful of the tension, what you bring into your activism, the good and the bad, the baggage. But also every stitch you make, it's visual. You're using your hands, so you're engaging in 2 or more senses. Every stitch you make, you're making a physical mark. And sometimes it's consciously, sometimes it's unconsciously, but you start seeing the progress you're making, whether it's a stitch at a time, whether it's something big or small. You naturally think, well, hang on a minute, if I can do this one little stitch, maybe I'm not completely helpless. Maybe I can have an impact on the world. So I think that slowness and that using your head, hands and heart together on your own, or whether it's in a group, when I feel very much that the world is overwhelming, I feel like I need to do something, but what's the point? I do physically make things, even if it's just a gift for someone's birthday. Using the process is incredibly helpful for me to calm down, slow down, focus, do that critical thinking that's needed, the strategic thinking, but also make time for empathy, for compassion, to think through what's the impact for the victims of this atrocity, for the people who are in power, how can I encourage and support them? Using your head, hands and heart together is incredibly powerful, and we know a lot from well-being of how it really helps with depression, anger management, with despair, so many things. Just using your head, hands and heart together, I think, is incredibly hopeful in the short term and the long term. And then for me, it's what can you add into the world? So I do strange things because the world needs to be full of diversity of lots of actions in different ways. So the way I contribute is these small pieces of catalysts for positive change. They're small, they're quiet, they're attractive, they're intriguing. And it's about where can you be of use? So where are the gaps? You know, it's not competing for what other activists are doing, it's complementing other work, knowing that we need all that variety. I'm not good at mobilizing people on a march because I'm an introvert, so it burns me out. I'm much better at quiet conversations. I'm good at creating things with my hands that get people thinking and talking. And my sister, as a social worker who's an extreme extrovert, has very different skills to me. So again, seeing myself as one jigsaw in that puzzle, and what can I bring that brings beauty into the world and encourages kindness and helps us create that happier, healthier, more harmonious world. It looks very, you know, this image is very odd because the world is odd and we live in such a strange, beautiful, messy place. You know, see all of your uniqueness as something, as a real gift to bring into the world, and see where it fits and complements what other people are doing. Oh, what's going on there? And then for me, it's acting from love, not hope, and not hate and fear. So again, in terms of that radical optimism and just our health, you know, to not burn out. We need to act from love, and that means love of perpetrators as much as those affected. It means thinking the best of people, not the worst of people. It's encouraging people, not demonizing people. What is that thread of love? How do we make sure that that's in everything, loving ourselves as well as others? And walking humbly. So you can see my banner that says walking humbly behind me. And this is me with my ironing board. You know, I do what I can. I do it all from my flat. I'm trying to help the world, but I start from where I am and then see the impact it can have. I don't start too big and try and save the world as a hero, which is, you know, all about ego. So we got to, you know, be aware of that. But I don't start too small. So I think walking humbly, seeing what you can do, and then let go. So it's quite difficult. Sometimes you do need to let go and not be like, I really want this to work and this to you know, be changed and this person to change their mind straight away. A lot of the impact I've had has been ripple effects. It's been doing something as a catalyst for conversation or action. It's been having a conversation with someone and then letting them have time on their own to engage with it in their own way. So also think about how everything you have does have impact, your words, your physical things you make, the things you do, and see that sometimes you'll never know the positive impact you'll have. Sometimes you are told, but just having that intention of, I want to be part of that positive change in the world, you might be surprised at the lovely positive impact you have. So I always end with my ribbon that says, little by little we travel far. So let's keep walking humbly, let's keep acting, but you know, it's not one quick fix, it is keep walking. And if you want to know more, as you can see, I could talk for hours, but you can find out more later. So I hope that was helpful. Let me stop my screen.
Sarah, thank you so much. So many incredibly hope-inspiring tips there and reminders of how we can resource ourselves as activists. So thank you so much. So our next speaker is Anthony Bennett. Anthony is an ECMO survivor who shares about his near-death experience that left him fighting for his life after returning from a school trip to Disneyland Paris in 2006. Anthony brings to light the importance of working together as a team and with our own inner voice. So Anthony, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. So I'm just gonna share my screen. So it's a pleasure to be joining with you all. Hope you're all having a superbly wonderful day. Now, what I'd like to do is take you all on a bit of a journey through a section of my life, and this is a section of my life where I nearly lost that very thing. But before we get into that, just to give you a quick introduction to who I am. So my name's Anthony. I come from quite a big family. I've got 4 sisters, 2 brothers. My favorite color is yellow, and I'm the biggest fan of a rapper called Eminem. Now, in the year 2006, I went on the best school trip of my life. It was me, my friends, abroad, no parents, having a really great time. On the 3rd and final day of the school trip, I started to feel a bit weird. Weird in the sense that I couldn't quite understand what people were saying. So I just tried to drink more water, thought I was dehydrated, and sort of push it to the back of my mind. Fast forward 2 days, I was no longer able to make sense of what I was saying or understand what people were saying. I could hear words but not make any sense of it. So my mum noticed that I was finding it hard to breathe and my feet had turned blue. So I was rushed to my local hospital where they took a scan of my chest and they came back with the news that my lungs were completely infected and my only chance of survival was if they could find a special life support machine called ECMO. Luckily for me, Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital in London had the last available machine. So I was rushed to Great Ormond Street and that's where I spent the next 7 weeks of my life. When I arrived, I was in quite a bad way and they had to try and figure out what it was that I had and where did it come from. So they narrowed it down to be in the air conditioning within the coach because everybody felt poorly, but everybody recovered after a couple of days, whereas I just began to deteriorate. So I was diagnosed with strep pneumonia, influenza, staphylococcus, and sepsis all at the same time. On top of that, I was given about 10% chance of survival. And on top of that, I had a seizure whilst in an induced coma. My white blood cells reduced to 0. And on top of all of that, during my stay in hospital, I had to be resuscitated. But in my case, it wasn't just once they had to bring me back to life, or twice, or 3, 4, 10. It was 12 times. So for me to be on this virtual talk with you all is pretty much a miracle. And the truth is, I really, really should not be alive. This is my mum, who was by my side every step of the way, and she'd always ask the medical team, what can I do to help? That's my son. And it was amazing because they allowed my mum to get involved. Small jobs. Here's a damp cloth. Do you mind wiping down Anthony's face? But that meant the world to my mum, being part of the team that's helping her son when he needed it the most. It's my nephew, Makai, and on this day, they didn't think I was going to make it through the night. So I had family and friends coming to visit me and pretty much say their goodbyes. But then I started to show small signs of improvement. They jumped on the hope that maybe they could save my life. So I was given what's called a tracheostomy, where they insert a small tube into the bottom of your neck and you breathe from this tube. So with that, you can't breathe through your nose or your mouth. They'd done another scan on my chest and they found 3 lumps on my lungs. So I had this exercise where I have to take a deep breath and exhale all the air and go, and as they did so, they'd get a suction tube and suck out all the gunk that was coming out of my tube, and it would help me to breathe with more ease. Now, during one of those exercises, one of the lumps they found went to go up and out the tube, but it was slightly bigger than the tube and it blocked half of my breathing tube from within. And with that, I began to panic because I was unable to breathe. I started to shake and I didn't know what to do. Medical team came running in, pushing my family aside and talking quickly about how they were going to remove this lump. And in that panic, I remember thinking to myself, do you know what? I'm tired of fighting. I'm exhausted. I can't keep doing this. And in that moment, I genuinely wanted to die, just to be at peace. I wanted it all to stop. But then I had one thought and it changed everything for me. I thought to myself, if I was to just give up and die, I would never, ever, ever get the opportunity to hear another Eminem album. And that was a genuine thought I had as a 16-year-old boy. But then I started to think about all the things I'd miss out on, all the places around the world I haven't been to, all the people I haven't met, and I love meeting new people, all the food I haven't tasted. So I told myself, now's not my time. I've got to give everything I have to try and stay alive. They managed to get a thicker suction tube and suck out that lump. And I remember that first gasp of air, that, and just thinking to myself, whoa, that was close. So then I started my new journey, and that was to build myself back up from scratch. I had to relearn everything from the beginning: how to make a fist, how to touch my fingertip to my nose, how to sit up, how to stand, how to walk again. And through that process, I got addicted to progress, because the more I pushed myself, the more machines they would take away. The more I pushed myself, the more tubes they removed, and the more medicine they would take away. And I felt like I was breaking free. It felt like my brain and my body were disconnected. My brain knows how to walk, but my body physically couldn't do it. So I became best friends with myself and started this journey of progression. Then I had the great news that I got to leave Great Ormond Street. And people ask me, how has my life changed since I went through what I went through? And my life changed the moment I stepped outside of the hospital, got into a taxi, because I haven't seen outside in 7 weeks, not even outside of a window. So everything felt quite new to me again. And I remember the first thing I paid attention to was the pace of life, how fast everybody was moving, just getting from A to B, because I was so slow as I was still poorly trying to build that strength again. Everything wowed me. And then I saw this. There was a woman pushing a buggy, then she stopped, picked up her baby. The baby said goo goo gaga. She said, oh, baby. And they were having a really nice moment. Now, what the old me would have saw here was a mum playing with her daughter or her son. But on this day, I saw it in a different way. What I saw was a little baby, brand new to the world, barely understands anything. A full-grown woman who kind of gets the gist of life, but they were able to communicate on the same level. And that was just showing each other love. They both understood that. So by me looking out the window and seeing that, it's almost like I was feeling what they were feeling. I felt good and warm and happy inside. So how it's changed me is I find myself more present in the moment, and I allow myself to experience emotions as I'm living through life. I try not to live automatically. I try to be very aware of every single day. So then I got home, opened my front door. My dad carried me upstairs because I was too weak to climb the stairs, opened my bedroom door, and I got the biggest surprise. My friends and family all jumped out, screamed surprise. And in that moment, it just felt really nice to be back home. And then I looked around the room and I noticed that my dad disappeared. So I asked my mum, where did dad go? And she said, oh, I'm not sure. Let's go and find him. So we went into the next bedroom and my dad was there, and he was standing at the back of the room, just staring out the window. And I remember just standing there waiting for my dad to turn around. He heard us enter the room, but he just stayed frozen looking out the window. Then he started to turn around, and that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks, because that was the first time in my entire life that I've ever seen my dad cry. My dad, he's quite a big guy, strong guy, 2 gold teeth, and he doesn't cry. But on this day, he was crying like a baby and he couldn't control it. So my mum asked him, why are you crying? And he took a deep breath and he said, I'm just so happy I got my son back. And when he said that, something happened to me. I went inside my head and I really started to think to myself, wow, I almost didn't exist anymore. And now I'm here. So then I started to think about all the people that were involved in helping me get my life back. And there was a long list of people: doctors, nurses, surgeons, nutritionists, anaesthetists, the cleaners who came twice a day to clean around my bed to make sure there was no bacteria, because I was so ill that bacteria from my bed could have killed me. The cleaners helped save my life. Every single person, no matter how big or small their role was, they all played a valuable part in building that team that allowed me to climb to the top and turn on that light bulb of life and be here today. So I'm forever thankful and forever grateful for everybody's involvement. Now, what I'd like to do to wrap up is talk you through a little bit of motivation. So I want to ask you, when you wake up in the morning, when you look in the mirror, do you love the person that you see? Do you love the thoughts in your head? Do your thoughts work with you or do they work against you? And where do you get your motivation from? Do you get your motivation from your friends? Is it your family? Is it YouTube videos? Is it yourself? Because I think it's so important to get motivation from within, but to do so, you first need to understand within. So I'm going to take you inside my head. Now, inside my head, I've got two voices. Some of you may have more, some of you may have less. My first voice is what I call my dreamer. This is the voice that randomly comes to me and says things like, I wonder what it would be like if. Imagine if I could. How cool would it be if I could create? Then I've got this other voice called the puller backer. And this is the voice that likes to talk me out of things. We're not good enough for that. We're not smart enough for that. Let's start the gym next month. And it tries to delay me or talk me out of my dreams. I noticed I had these two voices. So I told myself, I'm just going to follow that dreamer voice and see where it takes me. So one day my mum sent me to the shops, and as I was walking, the dreamer came. I wonder what it would be like to run a half marathon. And I got excited by that thought. And then the puller backer came out of nowhere. No, your lungs were bad. You could hurt yourself. It's dangerous. And I caught the two voices. So I told myself, I'm one person. I've got a voice telling me, let's go and do it. And at the same time, I've got a voice saying, let's not. So I get to choose which voice I want to speak with. So I said, puller backer, shh. Dreamer, what do I need to do? I need to eat right. I need to start exercising and running. Turn that into a consistent pattern and I'll be ready for a half marathon. On the day of the half marathon, at the start line, the dreamer came to me. I wonder what it's going to feel like crossing that finish line. I envisioned it and I got excited. As I began to run, a fair few miles in, the puller backer came. We're out of breath. I don't think we trained enough. I think we should stop. Let's go home, but we'll train really hard this year. We'll come back next year stronger. And I caught the two voices. One's voice telling me to go to the finish line. And at the same time, one voice is saying, let's go home. I get to choose which voice I want to listen to. So I said, puller backer, shh. Dreamer, you said finish line, let's go. Finish line, finish line, finish line. And when I got to the finish line, I got that overwhelming body buzz, that feeling of, wow, I did it. And I paid attention to what was happening in my head, and this happened. I started to believe in myself a little bit more. That dreamer voice got stronger, and that puller backer voice got smaller in my head. So now I understand how I work. So now inside my head looks like this. I super believe in myself, and that puller backer voice is quite small. So if it ever comes near me, I don't think we should, I flick it away, because I understand the difference of what will happen if I listen to the puller backer and what could happen if I listen to the dreamer. So just to finish off, I just want to invite you to start thinking about the voices in your head. What voices are speaking with you and what voices would you like to speak with you? One would want you to sit still or stand still and not progress. And one will always have your back and always want the best for you. And you get to choose. So I just want to end by saying thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining from all around the world. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I wish you guys a very super duper rest of your day. Thank you.
Anthony, thank you so much. That was so profoundly moving and inspiring. It's so incredible to hear your story.
Thank you.
Our final speaker today is Chris Johnston. With a background in medicine, psychology, and coaching, Chris has been involved in resilience training for over 30 years and now runs his training online at thecollegeofwellbeing.com. Chris's books include 7 Ways to Build Resilience and Active Hope, which he co-authored with Joanna Macy. Chris, it's so wonderful to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Georgie, and thank you everyone for coming. And thank you, Anthony. Really taken in a fantastic, inspiring story of resilience and hope. And I want to just hold that phrase, story of resilience and hope, because that's what we are serving. Really, one of the words that really stuck with me from Satish was serve. We're here to serve. And what we're here to serve is a story of resilience and hope. So what I'd like to do is just talk a bit more about what I mean by a story of resilience and a story of hope, how they're similar but not always the same. And also, what can we do to find our way back into the story when we've lost the plot? Because we'll have those moments. We'll have those moments when we're in the story of resilience and hope. And we'll have the story where we'll have those moments where it just seems to disappear from us. And um, I love working with pictures. And one of my favorite pictures, I'm gonna share screen. Let me see, and let's see if I can get this right. Um, Here we go, sharing screen. And here we go. I call it the spider diagram. And what I mean by this spider diagram is that the little squiggle in the middle is like the present moment, and each leg represents a different way the future can go. And hope is really about, well, hope is really about looking forward and looking at what we would like to happen. There's better ways it can go, there's worse ways that it can go. So I just want to anchor this image because I find it so helpful, and I'll say why. Because particularly there's some times where hope, a story of hope is like, I'm here and I'm heading up this way, but it doesn't work out like that sometimes. And we can find ourselves, like Anthony's just described, on one of the worst legs of the spider. We're in hospital, or we find that we've lost functions, and I'm just aware at the moment, the pandemic, someone on one of my courses last week had just lost her husband from COVID. We are going through this most extraordinary time of, in so many ways, for so many people, it's this difficult leg of the spider. And my work is very much about, well, when we're here, what helps? And over the summer, one of the most inspiring stories of resilience and hope that I was connected with was working with a group in Lebanon. And they'd asked me to come and do a resilience training for them earlier in the year. And we met every week through June and late June and July. And then on the 4th of August, there was this massive explosion in Beirut. And one of the people in our group, Dana, her home was destroyed, and she had this shocking experience of seeing where she used to live, and a huge part of Beirut destroyed. And I interviewed her afterwards, and she said, there was a time where she just run out of hope. And we'll have that too. We'll have times where we just run out of hope. And so what helps us when we're there? And I think one of the things that helps is also to recognize that we can get frozen, and a common response is powerlessness, where it just feels like we can't do anything. And one of my mottos is, we feel how we feel. It'd be very nice if sometimes we felt differently, but we feel how we feel, and we can make choices about how we respond to that. And if we come back to the spider, just this idea that even from the worst leg, it can go many different ways. For Dana, she got very interested in an approach called adversity activated development. And there's this lovely idea of post-traumatic growth, which, Anthony, you're such a great example of. There's what I think of as a transformative dip, where we go through a difficult time and we come out from it stronger. We've gained strengths, we've learned things, we've found resources that we may not have even looked for if we hadn't needed to. And this can happen on a personal level, and certainly it's been my experience. I've been through some deep dips in the past, and a lot of my work is helping others. But I also believe it's possible for us collectively too, that crisis can be turning points. And so one of the really important questions is, how do we make that more likely? when we're going through a time of crisis. And this is where resilience comes in, because a story of resilience tends to involve first a downslope and then an upslope. A story of resilience involves facing difficulty, whether in the past, in the present, or in the future, but also finding helping factors that lead somewhere better. And this is really what, just thinking, how does crisis become turning point? One of the ways it happens is where we start to get serious about looking at what supports and promotes well-being when it's so threatened. I want to look here at how we think about hope, because one approach to hope is about probability. You know, are you hopeful? And my own sense of hopefulness rises and falls. But there's another meaning for hope, which is about desire. It's about what you hope for. And my work has really been gravitating around this word active hope. And I love the idea that active hope is not something you have, but it's something you do. And just like gardening, you don't have gardening, you do gardening. And through your choices about what you plant, what you tend, what you care for, what you help grow, you can change the way the landscape develops. And it's the same in our lives too, through making choices about what we plant, what we give care to, what we grow. And I love the idea also that active hope is a bit like Tai Chi. You know, Tai Chi is a movement practice for well-being. Active hope is a movement practice for collective well-being, where we act in support of our hopes. So I think that there are these three steps. We start from where we are, and then we head in the direction. We start from where we are, however that is, feeling what we feel, identify what we hope for from that starting point, and then we take steps that way. Now, I was very hopeful in having lots of slides that I'm just going to jump through. But if there was one thing here, it would be moving away from this idea that hope has to be like a picture of hope, and move more to the idea of a sequence of hope. A sequence of hope is something that can have different frames, and you might even have a frame where you don't think that it's going to work, but then also something changes and you can find a way. And this is what I'm interested in, is how training can help that, how we can train ourselves in getting better at opening up possibilities. And so I wanted to share just a process with you. And you can do this now or later. It's just 3 steps, where number 1 is you identify something you hope for. And it might be in your own life, it might be in the world. And then I'm inviting you to imagine that it has happened, and then reflect on what you'd like about that. So this is very much building on both Satish and Sarah and Anthony in, I suppose, the dreamer voice. But it's saying, like, I wonder what it would be like if it had happened. And then look back from that imaginary future and say, what did I do to help it work out this way? What did I do to help this happen? So I'm going to suggest you just make a note of these 3 things. Okay, identify a hope, imagine that it's happened, and then look for what you can do to help that happen. I think of Viktor Frankl, Austrian psychiatrist in Auschwitz. There was a time where he was walking in the cold, his feet really frozen. And he kind of did a version of this in a way, that one thing he hoped for, he said, one day I will be giving lectures around the world about the psychology of concentration camps. And that thought organized what he did then. So, okay, if I'm going to do that, then I need to pay attention to what's going on around me. So he really took an interest in the psychology of the disaster zone that he was in. I'm going to invite you to do this, and also just to recognize that this is a larger process. I am developing a active hope foundations training, a training in the skills that support our capacity for positive change. And there's details about that on the website at activehope.info, and we're having a launch on the 28th of March. But I think that's the point I want to leave. And I suppose the thing about resilience has the down arrow and the up arrow. One of the key things in there is turning. And turning, if we think of turning as a process where the first part of turning is just turning up. I'm a piece of the jigsaw. I'm going to play my role. And in that, there'll be things we turn away from and things we turn towards. Thank you. I think that's my time.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. That's so many useful things for us to think about and really nurture our hope, even if we're not feeling it. So thank you. I will hand you over to Flo now. Will take us from here.
Thank you so much, Georgie. And yeah, wow, thank you, Anthony and Chris, for such inspiring talks, presentations. What a wonderful evening it's been to have such rich sharings from all the speakers. So I'm going to ask the first question of the evening, which is actually around, I'm going to combine a few questions have been around kind of staying optimistic. So Tristan asked, have you always been so optimistic? And that was directed to Satish, but could also be you know, spoken to by others if you feel so. And Joanne has asked, how do I let go of my ego and learn to become humble? And that was touching upon something that Sarah raised. So kind of this idea of being optimistic in the long term and kind of letting go of ego and humble. So I'd love to invite particularly Satish and Sarah on those first two questions, and then we'll move on to the next one, if that's okay. I see Sarah nodding. I'm not sure if, so Sarah, would you like to go first and then we'll hand to Satish?
Okay, try that.
I'm happy to do the ego one because that came out in my talk, and Satish will be better with the first one. For me, it's just constantly keeping myself in check of what are my motives. You know, our ego is there, it doesn't go away. The point of an ego is to keep you alive, so it's not always a bad thing, and it's not beating yourself up about it, but it's just checking what are my motives here. And like everything, you know, we don't live in a binary world, so everything's context by context. It's not a hard and fast rule for everything. So I do gentle protest because I don't want to do shameful, hurtful activism, and I don't think it's healthy for the individual because it's quite toxic for you in your physical and mental health. It's not helpful in terms of building relationships and people listening, and it's not as effective. So there's lots of reasons not to do it, but I also avoid conflict because that's just the way I am naturally anyway, whereas some people love to bash out a good argument. So I think, you know, with my work of craftivism, the craft, I'm not a big fan of craft, which shocks a lot of people. What I love about it is that it does serve the cause, and it serves the cause really well. Sometimes when I slip into, oh, my response will be with craftivism, I just always check, is that because I'm nervous to have a difficult conversation with someone? Is it because I love the feeling of doing repetitive hand action? So it's just asking yourself in a gentle, loving way, what are my motives here? You know, do stuff that you love because that will give you energy rather than drain you of it. But it always comes back to that balance of, is this more about celebrity and ego, or is this more about service? And really, you know, it needs to be 51% or more about service. And actually, in the end, we know in terms of well-being, and Chris will know this more than us, we know that actually contributing to society is much better for our own mental health, our hope, our happiness, than serving your own ego. So I just constantly question what I'm doing, and it gets quicker the more you practice it, just like empathy does.
Thank you, Sarah. That's really a really helpful answer, and yeah, really full answer. And Satish, would you like to respond to the first question around, have you always been so optimistic?
Answer is no. I have learned to be optimistic. In my life, I have gone through various stages, ups and downs, And then gradually I have learned that hope is a way of releasing your energy. Like your button, a switch in your room. When you come to a room, the room is dark. And so you put your finger on the switch and press the button, press the switch, and the light comes. So I have learned over the years that when I feel down, I feel pessimistic, I feel lack of energy, I say that word, hope, like a mantra, and say, hope, where are you? And then I look at the switch, and there's a switch, hope, and the energy comes. So it's not always there with you, but I have learned over the years. So everybody can learn, and we just focus that hope is possible. We can release our energy. It's like a little bow and arrow. The arrow goes, and the bow is the hope, and arrow is the action. So you tighten the bow and release the arrow. So that is how I have learned. So it's a kind of, it's a process. It's not something that you are born with both, hope and lack of hope. You are born with both. We both have that, like dark and light. We both have that. Yin and yang, we have both that. So, but over the years, I have learned to be more hopeful. And then I've seen the examples, as I said, many good examples, that those who have acted with hope have managed to achieve something. Like Berlin Wall came down because people had hope that one day Berlin Wall will go down. I walked through Berlin Wall, and Berlin was holding people away out in West Berlin and East Berlin. And then everybody, you could feel hopeless that it's never going to go away. But people worked at it, and then Germany became independent. I mean, a part of East Germany and West Germany became one. So those are examples give me a way to learn to be hopeful.
Thank you both for your incredible responses. I'm now going to combine a few questions. So thinking about the challenges that we face, social and environmental injustice, the struggle of mental health and well-being in the face of the pandemic, how can we encourage others to be hopeful and reach those that might find it hard to hear those hopeful messages, as well as how can we reach young people? I hope that makes sense. And I'd like to open that to Anthony and Chris.
Would you like to go first, Chris?
I was going to say the same to you, Anthony. How should we do this? Okay, I'll go. So, well, really important questions. And what you're doing is you're naming the work that we need to do. And what I really love, picking up this word serve, how do we serve our hopes? If we hope that people will feel more energized by hope, then how can we be active in support of that? And one of the most effective ways of influencing people is just by living the hope, expressing the hope. People are very influenced by what they see other people do. And if they see you living a particular way, it becomes a reference point. I'm so inspired by all the things that Satish has done over the years. It's a catalogue of one thing after another. And there's a kind of like an unstoppable force. But what I see behind that is a deep, heartfelt conviction that you show up to every day. And I kind of think, well, if Satish can do that there, then I can do this here. We follow each other, we support each other. So I say the first thing is live the way you hope people will live. But also it's then looking at this idea of, well, how do we spread it? How do we pass it on? And one of my big interests is in the process of training. We can become more skillful. I was so interested to hear Satish's journey of learning along the way. And so it's a great question to ask people is, have you always been like this? What helped you learn? And we need to have those conversations with each other. Thank you. So I'd love to hear what you have to say, Anthony. How did you learn? What are some of your top tips?
To be honest, it's quite a difficult question because I feel that everybody is on different levels in terms of how you can help and support people. But I think it goes back to time, firstly, and starting small and rippling outwards. So when it comes to time, what time can you give for someone? Is it just one person you want to influence and help and support? Or would it be a wider audience? So in terms of what I'm doing, I'm reaching out to more schools in terms of helping the younger generation. I feel like they definitely need that support. So with the technology we have nowadays, it's easy to reach out to a wider audience using Zoom, Teams, and it goes back to what you were saying, is about setting an example. So if you smile at someone, they tend to smile back or start that smile. So setting that example by just, I find it hard to explain actually, to be honest. So my brain's a bit frazzled. It's just dancing everywhere because there's so many pieces to this puzzle. But I'll just wrap it up by saying giving quality time to the individual to make them feel that hope from within. Sorry, that was a bit of a rambled answer, but that was a difficult question for me.
Just to add,
that's great. Thank you, Anthony.
There's a free course that I run called Resilience Tools for Free in a Time of Coronavirus Crisis. And so I'll just put that in on the chat window. Oops. I was just going to put that in the chat window and then I've just messed it up. Here's a free course.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
And I know that Sarah's responded to this question in the chat as well. So do check out her responses. And I just want to ask Satish if he has anything to add.
The thing is that I always look for examples. And when I see other examples, like Chris said, when you see the examples, I read poetry. And from poetry, I get hope. Every morning, for at least half an hour, I read poetry. So if any one of you who want to have some hope in your heart, I mean, even this Amanda Gorman's poem, I have read it 4 or 5 times, and that gives me hope. And so I read Hafiz, I read Rumi, I read William Blake, I read Rabindranath Tagore, I read Khalil Gibran, all these great poets. I think poetry can save the world. So my suggestion to anyone who asks the question, how do I get hope? How do I learn to be hope? One source is poetry. Poetry gives you hope.
Thank you so much, Satish. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful and accessible answer for everyone. I think that there's so much in creativity, like Sarah's been sharing, and that can be accessed in craft or poetry or lots of different forms. So thank you. And thank you, Anthony and Chris, as well, for your responses there. So our next question is very much about kind of building on what you've shared, Satish, there about your kind of regular practice of reading poetry. Morella has asked, what are your daily practices to support your well-being? And that could go to anyone on the panel, but what, do you have, maybe building on what Satish has shared about his daily practices, does anyone else have daily practices that they would like to share? Chris, go for it.
So every day I write. There's such good evidence about expressive writing. And I just fill 3 pages, and I've done it every day for over 20 years. And so that's my number one. But every day we have 2 dogs who take me for a walk. And while I'm walking, I ask myself questions. So one of my questions, I call it hunt the good stuff. Hunt the good stuff is, what's going well? What am I delighted about? And then also, who am I grateful to? And so these are questions I just ask pretty much every day. But then also, I just ask questions around what am I hearing? What am I seeing? I do a kind of 5 sense check-in. And because I do these when I'm walking every day, it's like these are my regular practices. But I'd love to hear what other people do too.
Sarah, do you or Anthony?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that, so when I get up, I say at least 3 things I'm grateful for or appreciate, from the very small of having, shelter, which is big in some ways, to, you know, very different things, but I just start with 3, and when I'm brushing my teeth, I'll make it even more. And then just, especially in lockdown, you know, I'm finding it very difficult, as a lot of people are, you know, just tiny things like when I make my coffee in the morning, I make sure I enjoy the smell. I make sure that I say, like, isn't this great that I've got milk in the fridge? And just tiny little things that doesn't take up extra time, but just makes a huge difference. I've noticed one thing, that if I don't make my bed in the morning, I actually just feel a little bit off for the rest of the day. I make sure that I have breakfast on my armchair with a book, not my phone, and I'm very intentional about what that book is. So it's always non-fiction, and it's hopeful but practical. But then I end the day with a novel that doesn't make me think about work at all. So I think just putting, you know, the more structure often is better. So putting some of that structure in, but just, for me, I'm so often on autopilot and trying to squeeze too much in, like the rest of us. So I'm just trying to be much more intentional of, why am I having this meeting? Why am I meeting that friend? What am I making, you know, am I being mindful of what's happening and enjoying every element, you know, everything that Anthony said about seeing things differently, you know, I try desperately to be incredibly grateful, and looking for those moments of light that Satish says, when there's darkness, you know, where you see these little light glistens even more. So I think it's just trying to slow a pace and not be on autopilot, but be grateful for those little things, knowing that it actually spares you on to create more great things and challenge injustice even more. It doesn't stop you from trying to make the world a better place. It actually helps.
Yeah, brilliant way to put it. Thank you, Sarah. And Anthony?
Yeah, so something I do, not just in the morning, but throughout the day, is firstly, I allow myself to be amazed by life. And this could be the simplest things, such as looking out the window and looking at a cloud go by and just thinking, wow, I'm part of this life experience. And then the second thing is to ground myself. So what I do is I do something very simple, and it could be brushing my fingertips on my beard, listening to the sound it makes or the feeling it has on my fingertips. So I'm sort of connecting myself to life. And then the third thing is feeling the emotion that that touch gives to me, or that sound that I'm listening to. Just how does my body react to what I'm doing, listening to, or smelling, or feeling, and just sort of allow myself to understand that I am part of this amazing thing that we call life. And I just do that in small doses throughout the day. And that allows me to keep my, in a way, my happiness level up high, and allows me to be a bit more self-aware of myself throughout the day. So I'm more in tune with my feelings if I'm feeling a bit low. And I always grade my feelings out of 10. Am I a happy 10? Am I a sad 2? Am I a 5? And I try to get to the core of, why am I feeling like that? Is it something externally that's made me feel like that? Is it something internally that I can fix, or something that I can think or ponder about, so I can find that inner answer that I'm looking for? But I use the power of thoughts a lot to help me get through life and keep myself quite balanced in a way.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And actually, thank you to all of the speakers. That was the last question that we had time for this evening. It feels like this has been such a rich and wonderful discussion that we could continue further for a long time, but we're coming close to the end of our event time, so we're going to move towards wrapping up. So I'd just like to say a huge, huge thank you to Satish, to Sarah, to Anthony, and to Chris for their wonderful presentations, all of the wisdom that they shared, and all of the wonderful presence that they've brought. It's really been inspirational to us all, the team organising this event included. I'd like to say thanks to the Resurgence Trust for co-hosting this event together with the Network of Wellbeing. It's been wonderful collaboration. Yeah, thank you to all of you guys for sharing such vibrant discussion on the chat box and for being such enthusiastic and hope-filled participants.